Chapter 5. The lights in the hall returned to normal, but the yellow felt sickly and weak. Several classroom doors opened, and Mrs. Bach's voice floated into the hall. Alejandro held a short blade that retracted into the handle before he slipped it into the pocket of his jacket. Alejandro's interpreter stood by the door, blinking rapidly, like she'd got a piece of disintegrated Fenris caught in her eye. "Time to go in," the interpreter signed to Alejandro, motioning toward the door. Alejandro shook his head and turned away, fists clenched with determination. He'd passed his first test and wasn't giving up. I ran a toe through the dust of my sibling on the floor. The descendants hadn't given Alejandro a fair chance. Things would have turned out differently if I hadn't intervened. Was he willing to die to pass a stupid test? If I stopped Alejandro from becoming a guardian, his memory would be erased, and I would lose the chance to study his emotions. But if I helped him through the tests, I would be technically betraying my own kind. I'd already chose this path when I ignored the call, but helping the descendants train a guardian to keep demons from getting the sustenance they needed was a deeper betrayal. Still, this was my last chance to have a moment where my essence could be filled with the emotions of ordinaries. My hunger rumbled, shaking me from the inside. It was a hunger I needed to fill. But I was no longer just interacting with an ordinary. I was in the sights of the descendants themselves. If I was caught, I would be thrown in the prison of the possessed, my essence scattered when Jackie died. They'd never believe a demon only signed a possession contract for 3 days. It had never happened before. Following Alejandro meant stepping into the unknown, choosing a road with a different destination. A road less traveled by. It was the line from another of my favorite poems that made me move my feet. I didn't understand everything that was happening, or why the descendants had chosen Alejandro, but I ran after him, following him toward the doors of the school. I touched his shoulder as he was about to exit the building. His eyebrows shot up in surprise when he saw me. "I want to help you." I pulled back to sign the words, conscious of the way he'd glance at my hand resting on his shoulder. "I thought you'd forget what happened," Alejandro said. Jackie would have forgotten if she'd been a normal ordinary, free from the possession of a demon essence, but I remembered the feel of my sibling in my arms. I'd fought every day of my demon existence to avoid becoming a Fenris, but that had meant sucking on the sorrow of people like Mrs. Bach and Alejandro, feeding off their darkness, sometimes even creating it. "I remember." I pointed to my temple and nodded. "And I want to help." "How can you help?" Alejandro pushed through the doors, holding one open for me as I followed him out. "What's the next test?" I asked. "To serve." "Easy. I know a soup kitchen downtown. You can literally serve soup for a couple of hours." I've never served the soup, but the kitchen was close to the library, and wasn't a bad place to find some abandoned strands of sorrow. Alejandro shook his head. He turned toward me as he signed the words, making sure I could see his emotions. The muscles in his face danced with expression, acting out a complicated play. Descendants protect, serve, and uplift without disrupting ordinary lives. I must do the tests without letting anyone know I'm doing it. I can take no thanks, receive no gratitude or reward, or I fail the next 2 tests. Why would you do anything that doesn't benefit yourself? The idea baffled me. After an existence spent trying to satisfy my own hunger, that's not the way of the descendants of angels. Their purpose is to bring light without exposing the source. That is what creates hope. And hope is light. I meant to sign the words the way a young ordinary repeats their parents' rules, full of sarcasm, but I couldn't roll my eyes the way I'd seen other ordinaries do. Alejandro looked at me with one eyebrow quirked. "I don't understand why your face doesn't move," Alejandro said. "I'm confused by what you mean." "You'll have to deal with my face if you want help. I know where we could go to serve without getting caught." I had never considered using my demon abilities to help someone, but if I wanted to change in a new way, I had to follow new paths. Alejandro drove, and I directed him downtown to an older brick building with construction barrels blocking the entrance to the parking lot and a garbage chute dangling from an upper floor window. I generally avoided eating construction workers' sorrow. The sorrow often had a gritty texture with an oily aftertaste. Too many construction workers were tied to the belief that if they worked hard enough, things would eventually go their way. Many of them worked themselves to death on that hope. If the goal was to serve without getting caught, This was the right place. A lot of people doing different tasks focused on getting through the day. We'd blend right in. We started with piles of garbage, grabbing heavy bags that had been left for an evening cleanup, or items too large to fit down the garbage chute. We walked the long way through the building, sometimes taking the stairs instead of the elevator, always doing whatever it took to avoid being noticed. When Alejandro would turn away, I would stop and take time to move my eyebrows, scrunch my lips, or puff out my cheeks. The muscles barely responded. My large motor skills improved with every load of trash we took out of the building, but I could not access the small muscles of my face. A group of construction workers waited for some concrete to harden. The air was cool and the concrete was drying slowly. I don't know what kind of people have the patience to wait around for stone to harden. I heated the air around the concrete and saved the construction workers 3 hours of waiting. Alejandro proved observant as well. He tightened the connection on a loose safety harness, keeping a man from falling from some scaffolding. He corrected the placement of some straps right before the crane lifted a heavy load into the air. He saved the whole load and possibly the life of the man directing the crane. "How did you know to do that?" I asked. "Have you worked in construction before?" He shrugged, turning away from me instead of answering, cutting off any other questions. By the end of the day, I could see the small changes we had made. The strands of emotions shifted and swirled in each man, colors brighter and stronger than at the beginning of the day. Some of the workers would find their work done and turn and help another. We were cleaning a final pile of debris when the foreman walked in, doing a walkthrough with a man in a clean, expensive suit. The man in the suit shook hands with the foreman. "We are more than pleased with the improvement today." The foreman's chest glowed with a pink strand of pride. Then he turned and laid eyes on us. I pushed a gust of wind through the window openings, scattering dust into the air and making both the foreman and the owner turn and cover their eyes. Alejandro and I ran around the corner and climbed out the window onto the scaffolding. We matched each other as we climbed down, hand over hand, dropping the last 10 feet to the pavement. The foreman called out the window for someone to stop us, but we were already around the building and out on the street. We slipped into the second open business, a small cafe, and sat at a table. Alejandro laughed as 2 construction workers in hard hats ran by, looking for the intruders on the construction site, never guessing they were looking for a demon and a future guardian. Alejandro's chest grew an emerald strand of emotion, happiness. My essence shifted again, almost like I wasn't empty anymore. Still, I could not get my lips to form the slightest smile. It was nice not to feel empty and hungry, but it wasn't the same as feeling something. "Do you think that was enough to pass the test?" Alejandro asked. "I don't know. Maybe you were able to do some good without getting caught. And even more than that, Alejandro had done some things that looked closer to a miracle. How did you know about the other things? The things that saved people's lives today?" Alejandro looked away. I knew the lack of movement in my face still bothered him. All my efforts through the day had failed to make a single facial muscle twitch, but this wasn't about me. Even demons who keep secrets don't like secrets being kept from them. "How did you know to do those things?" Finally he looked at me. He formed the words slowly, hesitantly. "I have a sense when bad things are about to happen. I get impulses or feelings of what I should do to stop those things from happening. I don't always know why or what changed, but I have something in me that is always guiding me, telling me to do things that I wouldn't normally do, and I've learned to never ignore it." I sat back against my seat as the waiter brought us both a glass of water. I'd seen what Alejandro was talking about, the golden thread from this morning that wrapped around my wrist, a fate thread. That explained the interest of the descendants. Even though Alejandro was strong and quick and observant, those qualities weren't unique, and there were probably millions of other ordinaries who could do the same things. The descendants knew that Alejandro influenced the future, and they wanted him on their team, or they wanted him out of the picture. That's why the first test had been so unfair. If he passed, that meant his fate thread was real. If he failed, he was out of the picture, no longer an uncontrolled variable. The descendants sleep better, either way. "That's why you're letting me help. You knew I was important." Alejandro shrugged again. I had an impulse that I needed you around, that you were an important piece. My essence emptied out, the hunger returning full force. An important piece? I didn't know what that meant. Had a demon ever been touched by a faith thread? Or was Jackie supposed to be the one to help Alejandro, and I screwed up his internal compass? I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I satiated my hunger with the sorrow of a woman crying in the stall. I studied my face in the mirror while I sucked on the strand of sorrow caused by an unexpected breakup that was long enough to wrap around the bathroom twice. I touched my face the way Alejandro had this morning. One eyebrow up, two eyebrows up, wrinkles forming on my forehead, lips spread wide, lips pursed thin, a weird version of face yoga that left my face tingling, but still beyond control. After studying Alejandro's facial expressions all day, I could see how much I lacked. I could not get the facial muscles to move, no expressions, a wax model of the body I possessed. If I could move my face, maybe I could force myself to feel emotions, but there was nothing. When I approached Alejandro, he stood. His eyebrows were pulled down, his lips tight, his eyes lowered. It was not a good emotion. Through the glass window of the cafe, I saw the descendant recruiter walking away, hat pulled down low to avoid attention. Before I could ask what he had wanted, Alejandro lifted his hand and directed his words toward my heart. I know who you are.